Hi, I hope you're having a great day. My name is Donald Yin, and today we'll be discussing my fall semester final project. Obviously, I'll be presenting this through a video presentation. So, to demonstrate my knowledge of the 7 units we've learned throughout the semester, I'll talk about 5 significant events that happened in my life. This can vary from very positive and beneficial to very stressful and scary situations. For each of my events, I'll connect 4 different concepts that stretch over the 7 units. And overall, my presentation will include 2 to 3 concepts from each unit. So without further ado, my first event is traveling to the Amazon with my family. Going to the Amazon has been on my family's bucket list for a really long time now, and in the winter of 2018, we had a chance to go to perhaps the most exciting and adventurous vacation we've ever been on. My family traveled to South America, exploring the countries such as Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, but the most exciting one was probably the Amazon. We had many activities in the forest, as one person would have when traveling to far places, such as forest hunting in the night for animals, trying to look around, see if we can spot any night animals, or canoeing alongside the river for fishing for piranhas. And maybe the most exciting one, the most rarest, is swimming with the rare pink dolphins. With all these activities, I felt a sense of joy and feeling of isolation from society. Deep in the forest, with all these activities, I had no service, so I was able to fully dive deep into the forest and not connect with society, which I really enjoyed, in fact. Additionally, I had some interactions with the villagers in the river villages. I could connect with them and learn about their lifestyles, such as they're very different from us they don't have electricity or barely any, and don't have constant running water like we do. At my time there's one specific memory I always remember. It was being provided Coke by the local bar manager, which is a very special thing, in fact, because they only provide it to visitors, and with such a limited supply and scarce village, I was honored to actually receive Coke. And that actually spiked a past memory, because when I went a missionary trip with my church group in Mexico, I also got a drink of Coke there, which from underprivileged families and villages, it's just, you don't want to take it, but then they offer it only to visitors, so it just spiked my memory and made me remember that I'm very grateful for the lifestyle I have. Now, at the Amazon, there are a few distinct concepts that were shown through psychology. For instance, long-term memory, retrieval, my somatic nervous system, and my temporal lobe. The long-term memory is the relatively permanent storehouse of memory that holds knowledge, skills, and experiences from the past. This helps describe why I was able to remember Coke, as I moving on to my next word, retrieval, which is the process of retrieving information from your memory storage. I was able to take out this information from my long-term memory and help me remember the situation with Coke and connect it to experiences I had before. Along with that, the somatic nervous system is part of the peripheral nervous system, and it helps with voluntary control of body movements, which helps explain why I was able to swim with the dolphins. If I was in the water and I didn't have the system next to me, I wouldn't know how to swim, and I would probably sink down. So this helped explain my behavior and my actions of able to float in the water and have a good time in the water. And lastly, the temporal lobe is another word that helps describe how I was performing these actions at the Amazon. The temporal lobe is a lobe that lies roughly above my ears, right around here, and it includes auditory areas, which are receiving information primarily from the opposite ear. This allows me to hear forest animals and the screeching, the little barks, hisses from snakes at night when I was forest hunting for animals. So that just allowed me to perform another example of my activities, such as the last 3 terms. So this is my first event done, and my next event that I'll be talking about is getting my Eagle Scout, specifically the Board Review, which is just a bunch of councilmen interviewing you and see if you are a good candidate to receive the Eagle Scout Award. Finally reaching the board review part is probably the peak of my Boy Scout career. I've already finished the Eagle Scout project, which I built a permanent compost bin for my church. This is the point where I have to prove myself and show demonstration of leadership throughout my 6 or 7 year career within my Boy Scout troop. So the night before my board review, I was really nervous, as probably anyone would be if there's a very important interview the next day. I really couldn't sleep. I was kept thinking about it and stressing out about it. But eventually, I fell asleep, and I can recall that I had a dream, and the dream was actually about a past Boy Scout camping experience where me and my friends had a good time in the river. So it's just kind of a memory of a really good experience I had with my troop, as I know that achieving this is pretty much is even the peak, but also the beginning of the end of my career with Boy Scouts. So with that, I didn't get that many hours of sleep. I woke up and then I wasn't feeling that good because I had to wake up pretty early and I didn't get enough rest, so I was still really tired. And then, so even though I was tired, still had to push through it. So I got ready for the day because I had another duty to do before my interview. And so when it came interview time, I felt prepared. I had everything ready. I was fully fit out in my Boy Scout costume, and I believe that I was able to pass. Throughout the process, they asked me multiple questions like, how would you demonstrate leadership? What are your biggest regrets, your biggest achievements? What would be something you passed on to the younger scouts? And I remember there's multiple instances where I could have answered the question multiple ways. For instance, demonstration of leadership, I could have answered that in many different ways of it's just how I wanted to decipher the question and answer it thoughtfully and thoroughly. And another time was, in fact, where I didn't really know how to answer the question. The question was asking me about what was my biggest regret, and I spent some time thinking about it, but suddenly I remember what my biggest regret was, and that was just not acknowledging that this time would not be here forever. So I just suddenly realized the answer to that question, and through the whole process until the end, I had to wait for a little bit, and then since it was all on Zoom, they took a few minutes and they decided that I was good enough and qualified enough for an Eagle Scout. So now I became an Eagle Scout. Now, throughout the entire interview, there are a few psychological terms terms from psychology that helped me through that entire day. Firstly was dreams, which is a sequence of images, emotions, and thoughts that pass through a person's mind, such as my dream about the past river experience when I was sleeping. So there's an example of a dream popping up when I was sleeping. Another one is the circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is actually a biological clock. It's a regular bodily rhythm that is based on a 24-hour cycle and helps show through light and dark. So when I was light, I should typically biologically be awake, and at night I should be asleep. However, with the stress and nervousness, I kind of broke off from that circadian rhythm, which didn't really affect me too much, but it definitely didn't help me reach the fullest potential to my answers because I was tired. But even though this biological clock makes me supposed to want to sleep at that time, at high school I've done it multiple times where I was able to kind of alter that, and as with many homework, I can fall asleep late and wake up early. So even though that clock is supposed to be there to regulate my time like it did, I was partially used to it already due to the school. During the interview, I felt that I really through all my questions, most of the times I use divergent thinking, which is expanding the number of possible solutions and creatively thinking them into different directions. There's no exact answer to each of my questions. Yes, there are particular ones that are better, but with all the examples I have and all the experience I have, I can creatively form an example and answer it to fit to best fit the question they asked. And along with that, when I talked about, I suddenly realized my biggest regret of not taking or not acknowledging the moment I have or not taking advantage of it is an example of insight. And insight is a sudden realization of a solution to a problem that contrasts with strategy-based solution. I had to strategize my answers and think about not to say anything dumb or stupid, because that is still a very important time. So using that insight, or the insight came up to me, I was able to think of a quick answer and solve it and answer it to the question. Now, through all of these concepts I provided, they all helped me, or 3 of them helped me with my interview, and 1 of them should have deferred me, but with the use of it and the constant waking up early, sleeping late, I was able to get through that, even though the biological clock said I should have slept. Now, my next event that demonstrates my understanding of these terms is when I first moved to a new house, which is the first of the 5 that is not such a positive event. Alright, so after talking about the first 2 events, which were pretty positive events, now we move on to one of the more negative effects to me. It was a shock, more as it came out of nowhere. I didn't really know. Perhaps I was young and I didn't understand it, but moving to a new house was a very shocking event. I was having a good time with my friends, developing relationships with people that it's hard for me to do when I was young. I wasn't really open myself up, but by opening myself up, I was able to form friendships. Some of those friendships still last, but just very minimal. So pretty much moving to this new place, moving from Arcadia to Rancho Cucamonga, was a huge life change for me, but mainly for my family and my parents for their decisions. And through these times, I was very sad because I wanted to stay with my friends, obviously, and my life was back there. I did move around 5th grade, which isn't that old, but still for a kid, moving away from my friends was very hard for me. So when I got here, I was obviously excited for the new things to come, but at the same time, I was sad and stressed out. I didn't want to make new friends. I didn't want to start a whole new life over, but with all the things that came with it, the rewards took the risk. So pretty much, after moving here, there are a few things that came to my eyes, and I need to be able to cope with the decisions that have already been made and just deal with my life. So with that, when we first moved, there were a lot of things going on, like moving new furniture in, and just moving new furniture in. I had to cope with everything and make new friends, and obviously we were scouting out the house. Throughout this entire process, there are about 4 terms that really are demonstrated in psychology. First is selective inattention. When we first moved into the house, like me, my mom, and we were focusing on this new vacuum that we wanted to purchase. However, I wasn't really able to notice what was actually going on behind me, which was selective inattention, which means an intentional blindness that fails to see the visible objects when attention is elsewhere, which was the vacuum. I was unable to see the couches moving behind me, everything moving behind me. I was focusing on this vacuum. I turned around and everything was gone. I wasn't able to see that, so that demonstrates my selective inattention. And whereas before we even moved into the house, I had the example of size constancy. Size constancy is perceiving to have something to have a constant size, even though any direction, angle, or distance varies, it still looks the same size. When we first drove by this house, if I look from the left, the right, or the front, or even really far out, I can still tell that the house was the same size, just as demonstrated in one of my videos in the digital notebook where I showed the size constancy with that door. Size constancy was also demonstrated within moving to this new house. Yeah, and then when moving into this new house, I mentioned that I had to deal with making new friends and coping with whatever I had lost. So a psychological term is coping, which is alleviating stress using emotional behavior, and specifically problem-focused coping, which is by changing the stressor. And by doing so, to change the stressor, I quickly made new friends. I was sad that I lost most of my friends, so I wanted to quickly make new friends to deal with the stressor, change it out, and from then on, I wasn't really sad anymore. And to do that, I had to learn about it. And learning is, or specifically social cultural influence learning, is influenced by culture and its motivation affected by presence of others to make new friends, such as when I learned to make friends by seeing other people have friends here. So that motivated me to say fit in, quote unquote fit in, just have a new life with them, and just had to learn the ways of Rancho Cucamonga and how to make friends here and really living a lifestyle here. Now these four terms really are shown through me moving here. They had a big influence in my emotional feelings and how I perceive the entire process of moving houses. Now the next event that is also a very negative event, and I could say life-threatening, is when I was in the Boy Scout summer camp. I was rappelling going down a cliff, a 40-foot cliff, and the rope suddenly slipped and I started falling. Attending these Boy Scout summer camps have always been fun, always offering opportunities to explore, adventure, and just do whatever you want to do. So obviously, as a very seeking person, I wanted to go mountain climbing, or rock climbing. So with this event, I was doing my merit badge and I had to go down a cliff, a 40-foot cliff. When I was going down, rappelling down, so the person on top has a rope and wrapped it around my belt. But when I was going down, that rope slipped from the top and I started falling down and I landed alongside the cliff, scraping my entire knee, and it was all bloody and all. And I obviously had to make quick decisions, or I would have been here now. So I quickly grabbed the rope and held on tight, make sure it didn't move anymore so the slack would stop, and I would remain there, floating in the air, waiting for everything to calm down, and I slowly rappelled down again. Now, with this, I had to be in control of everything. I had to make sure I knew what I was doing, or else something else, a worse thing could have happened. So when I was falling down the cliff, I had to utilize critical thinking. Critical thinking, examining evidence and the source of the problem or assumptions. So I had to quickly, in a split second, examine what the source of the problem was and use critical thinking to realize that the person on top, the rope slipped and my belt slipped. So I quickly held onto the rope. That allowed me to do that. Along with that, in order for me to do that, in fact, I had two parts of my biological part, which is frontal lobe and adrenal glands. The frontal lobe is right behind my forehead, and involved in making plans and judgment and muscle movement. With this lobe, I was able to quickly make a judgment of what I needed to do and move my muscles to hold on to the rope tightly, make sure I won't fall again. And adrenal glands is part of it. It includes the fight or flight response, which is when you perceive a harmful effect, or event, attack, or threat to survival, which that clearly was fight or flight situation. So I needed to act quickly, and adrenal glands helped me there, where I was able to survive the fall. And after I got down, I was very curious about what happened. I didn't know why. I knew part of it, but I wasn't sure exactly. That's where curiosity came in, which is the passion to explore and understand without being misled. So I asked them, I made sure what happened just to get everything right. Know not to do it next time, and just my curiosity took over, and I wanted to make sure that I was safe and having fun at the exact same time. Now these four also heavily demonstrate my survival in this situation. And moving on from a very life-threatening, this one is, the next event is just my first time taking an AP test, which is not as life-threatening as it is, so yeah. Any hard test, especially an AP test, one person studies really hard, spends a lot of hours studying, trying to make sure they get the best score they can. And in fact, the first test I had was, people say it's one of the hardest ones, which is AP Physics 1. So for when I studied, I gave myself multiple breaks after a certain amount of questions were done. After maybe, let's say every 10, I get a 5-minute break. Or after 30 minutes of studying, I get a 5-minute break. Multiple things like that contribute to helping me pass the AP test. In addition to that, I am a type of person who likes to observe by seeing things. So by going to tutoring, like for physics, I can observe lab experiments, such as also Mr. Su in the AP Physics 1 teacher. I observe my classmates, him, do different laboratory experiments to demonstrate physics concepts. And yeah, and through all of these practicing and experiences, it's still hard to get a really good score. So that's why when I was taking the test, I in fact forgot some answers. I knew it. I knew some of the answers perfectly. I knew some of the answers I didn't know at all. And there are those few where I felt like I knew it. It was right there on the tip of my tongue, but I just couldn't get it out, and I couldn't figure out the right answer. So I pretty much did an educated guess on the test. Now through practicing and studying and taking the test, there are a few psych concepts utilized. Probably pretty obvious when I said interval and tip of the tongue, but when I studied by so it's 30 minutes or an hour and taking a couple minutes break, that was a fixed interval schedule because it's a reinforcing schedule that reinforces a response only after a specified amount of time. So it's not variable where it's random times. It's a set time, for instance, 45 minutes and a 10-minute break, 45 minutes and a 10-minute break. That's very effective for me, but I also wanted to try different things. So I also did a fixed ratio schedule, which is reinforcing schedule that reinforces responses only after a specified number of responses. So I use those responses as questions answered. So for an example, after every 10 questions, I would take a 5 or 10-minute break. and so on. It wasn't variable either. It wasn't where I did a random number of questions and took a break. I didn't know. I needed to know when, so I counted the questions I did and took a break. And when talking about learning and viewing Mr. Su and my tutor, it is observational learning. Observational learning is by observing others. It's also called social learning, where I was able to observe what other people are doing to gain knowledge and hopefully have that show on my AP test. And lastly, during the AP test, I said that I had the tip of the tongue sometimes. That is called retrieval failure. It's actually called a tip of the tongue phenomenon. And it's a retrieval process. It's a retrieval process that doesn't produce a complete response, but parts of it. But it produces parts of the response that need to be combined together to create the whole response. So it's pretty much if there's a question that has 4 parts, it's just producing 1 or 2 of those parts, or maybe even 3, but not the final product. And with that, that influenced my testing. So all of these influenced my testing in a good way, except the retrieval failure, but through studying tactics that I didn't know of, but until now, that I was able to pass the test. So throughout learning these terms and units in AP Psychology this semester, I was able to pull a lot of information and learn about a lot of things that I was already doing without me knowing. For instance, in the Unit 3 Biological Basis of Behavior, I was able to learn reasons why I can control my arm or hear things. And for Unit 6 of Learning, where, for example, as stated, learning during the AP test, I had a fixed interval or fixed ratio schedule where I was doing, but I didn't know the actual term of it. Sensation and perception, where whenever I'm driving around, or I can always see like shape constancy or many of the other terms. And lastly, with for Unit 11, testing individual differences, that is applied a lot already, such as insight, or possibly even last year when I took stats, that many of those psychological or psychology terms have already been utilized in that previous class. I can use a lot of this knowledge to help navigate in my future life. For example, specifically, the learning chapter is a really good way. A learning chapter and the learning chapter and the cognition chapter is really helpful in retaining information. Going to college in less than a year, I will take that information and try my best and use all of the studying techniques like mnemonics or any other things like that to my advantage, and hopefully do the best I can. And there are a couple other things that can help navigate through my life, such as biological basis of behavior. I know why this happens. I know that as many people say, don't do drugs, and I could see the side effects of the drugs, like hallucinogens or many other things like that. Well, I could just use a lot of these AP terms and AP psychology terms and really help use them in my life. Thank you for listening to my presentation.